All right, so I have a very special guest on the show today. Chris Balzano is a paranormal researcher, haunted folklore specialist, podcaster, teacher, author of many books on different paranormal subjects and areas. I picked up a copy of his most recent book, Haunted Ocala National Forest. It was fantastic, and we'll be getting into that because there is a lot to learn about the Ocala and its spooky lore. Chris, welcome to the show. How the heck are you?
Excellent. Thank you very much for having you. I know we joked offline about me correcting anything from my bio, and already I have to correct something.
Yeah, oh, go for it, please.
I like to think of myself as a reformed paranormal investigator.
Ah,
I am now what is known as a legend tripper. So
okay. We're getting
only
right
be,
into
and,
it.
and the only reason why I say it is because I think it's important that my perspective on the paranormal has dramatically changed over the nearly I think it's like 25 years that I've been doing this stuff, and so it kind of molded both of my most recent books about Florida. So it's a really cool thing to clarify at the beginning, and it makes me sound really snooty, so people get like a
I'm reformed.
I'm a reformed paranormal investigator. Yes.
Well, oh boy. So there's a couple of questions I already have for you. I'm going to ask you about legend tripping
Yeah.
because that is a new concept to me that just I just I think learned about on your show, actually, your podcast. But you are indeed one busy dude. You've got you've got a lengthy list of accomplishments in the paranormal field, which shouldn't come as any surprise as you have been at it for so long. I would be interested to hear just how this journey all began for you and
Sure.
how it ultimately led you to, specializing in haunted folklore and becoming a reformed paranormal investigator.
um, how did I become reformed? Some would say that I'm not reformed at all. For me, it all started at just growing up. I always say I come from the first generation that went to the drive-in theater with their parents, where you were watching something like Herbie Goes Bananas, and then after that it was The Exorcist. And
Ooh.
parents thought that we were asleep, but we weren't asleep in the back watching those. And you know, from the first generation of kids growing up having HBO, and your parents went to bed and you snuck downstairs and all of a sudden you were watching some of the best horror movies of all time after midnight, with the swears and the nudity and all that stuff, and all of the things that kind of draws to horror, but you're like 7, 8 years old having no idea, no context for it, so you're really just like absorbing all of this and the raw emotion of it. And then I was, rather than being a latchkey kid, I was a kid who was left at the library. I had to
Ooh.
walk. I feel like really old saying this. In my day, I had to walk a mile to the library. I did it for my elementary school. I used to have to walk a mile to the library, and then stay at the library for 2 or 3 hours waiting for my mom to get out of work to pick me up. And
Hmm.
I was just consuming books, and the books that I was consuming were not only supernatural books and books on the unknown, but also Greek mythology and folklore, everything from Paul Bunyan to Zeus, and I just soaked it all up like a sponge, and it just stayed in my head. Like, the one thing I can say about myself, we can talk about whether or not I'm a good writer, but the idea that I remember things and make connections. So when I went off to college at Boston at Emerson, I was at the Charles Gate Hotel, which is one of the most haunted buildings in Boston. And people were telling me all the time about things that were happening to them. So already I was a storyteller, but I was getting these stories, and I would ask the people, well, why do you think that happened? And they would say, oh, the story I heard is, one of the students committed suicide there, and so now every year on the anniversary. And I was like, wait a minute, I've heard that story. I heard that story in North Dakota about
Hmm.
this thing, because I just consumed so much ghost lore and folklore. And so I started to think that, there is this crossroads, this intersection between hauntings, which may or may not be true, and the stories we tell about them, and the stories we develop about them, and the ones we fall back on to explain the things that are unexplained. And so I was one of the first people, once again, old man, one of the first people to have a website dedicated to ghost stories and hauntings of a particular area, right? Like they're very general.
Mm.
One of the precursors is like, the Warren's old website, which was about New England, but there was no Massachusetts. And so I set up my first Massachusetts website. And then all of a sudden, people were, because I was one of the only ones out there, people were hitting me up with more stories and more hauntings. So I had to become, more read on local things. And then I had to go out there and experience them. And that just naturally led to becoming an investigator. And so I spent, a decade and a half being an investigator, investigating, personal homes, but then all these classic places. And then I eventually kind of found myself like empty. I was doing the news for Ghost Village, which if people don't know, because it seems to not be nearly as popular as it used to be, but it used to be the paranormal website, Jeff Belanger's site. It was like where everyone went. And then I was also doing for Spooky South Coast, which is a radio show out of Massachusetts. I was booking guests and doing their social media was coming alive. And I realized that I was posting things and no one cared. And I kind of fell out of this idea of like, what, I don't think I have a place in the paranormal anymore. And so I laid low for a little bit. And then when I came back, my thought process was, no one reads a ghost story and no one really gets into this because of an EMF spike, right? Or a thermal imaging. So like,
right,
it was a dark and stormy night and the thermal camera did this. Like, it's the heart of it, right? And we were losing the heart of it. We were going out there with all this equipment and we weren't using our eyes, and we were measuring temperature, but not noticing the chill going down our spine. And so I fell back to what I was originally doing when I would go out, which is legend tripping, which is you hear about a place and you go and experience it the way that people tell the legend. So rather than trying to gain evidence, you're trying to gain experience. And then along with that, it started to be, once again, that whole crosswords idea I had, but I became consumed with, or I returned to, I should say, why is this story being told in this area at this time by those people? And so in telling the ghost story, the research that I do and how deep I go into it tells about the community itself, right? It tells about what the people think, what the people are scared of. You can't tell the ghost story without telling where that place comes from and where it is now. Like the Ocalas, or the haunted National Ocala or Ocala National Forest is a good example of, you have to understand those communities to be able to tell those stories. And so in doing it, you're really becoming not only a storyteller, but also a history teacher and getting into the psychology of things. And that made me more interested. And so that kind of rejuvenated me. And so I've been this legend tripper for the last almost 6 years now. And I've kind of finally found what I'm really good at.
So did you kind of coin that term, or was that already?
No. I mean, it really goes back to like, I would probably the 30s and the 40s, although it might be more than that. You've read the book, so there's this one story about the Oviedo lights, right? And this idea about the Oviedo lights was people were coming around. Oviedo is a town right outside of Orlando, and it had these ghost lights. And the story behind these lights, one of the origin stories, is a person had committed suicide at the bridge, which connects Oviedo to the next town. And he came back from World War II. The woman he loved had gotten married to someone else, and he committed suicide by hanging himself from the bridge. And he was the first Oviedo light. And then all of a sudden, other people would either join him in the suicide, so it became someplace other veterans were coming, or they would, people would just die there in car wrecks in the area, and they became the Oviedo lights. And so every year there would be more Oviedo lights, and they would seem to be dancing in the sky. They would seem to be playing with each other. So this is not, even if swamp gas is really a thing, this is not that. These are not explosions. These are not even temporary lights. There are lights that would have a personality and move and dance and in different colors. And the fun thing used to be, you would go in carloads of people to go watch the Oviedo lights, right? Like you would literally say, hey girl, like, what you want to do this Saturday? Go to the movies or go to the Oviedo lights? And you would do it. And and so it really became like old school ways of looking at the paranormal. Like legend tripping in its basic form is you and the other kids in the area have a spooky house that's down the street, and you challenge each other to knock 3 times because you know the monster's going to come out. That's what legend tripping is, the awe and that spark of like, that what are we scared of? And it's crazy, and we're challenging each other, and oftentimes it's a rite of passage. So I just kind of borrowed or brought the term back, although other people, use it. Jeff Belanger himself has a book, Picture Yourself Legend Tripping, which is part of, one of the series that I was involved in too. So it's not necessarily a new term. It's just one that I think is that I'm a lot more comfortable with it.
So you brought up the Ovida lights, the ghost light phenomenon.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening in the Ocala Forest. I think you are probably the perfect person to write about it because you are able to kind of make these connections and pull things together so well. I wanted to say, and I don't know how to say it correctly, but reading this book, it was very reminiscent, like in a nostalgic way, of the books that I would pick up as a kid, those spooky, creepy, paranormal books. So I guess what initially drew you to write specifically about that area, the Ocala?
So keeping in mind that I was an investigator, so I have that investigator mindset and the pseudoscience of looking at ghosts and paranormal investigating and the ideas of why things are, right? And then on the other side, I have this, I did a lot of research in my early days on the Bridgewater Triangle, which is in Massachusetts. And my first book was called Dark Woods, which is about Freetown, Massachusetts, which up until I went to the Ocala was the creepiest place that I have ever been in my life. And when I was writing about Dark Woods, the idea was it was this place where people don't know the Bridgewater Triangle, anything you can possibly imagine in the paranormal exists in this area, right? It was coined by Lorne Coleman in the 70s, and it was in Mysterious America in 1983. And people have been doing it, and it kind of laid dormant, like in terms of people talking about it. But I kept being drawn back to this place time and time again, not knowing that it had a name, not knowing that it was called the Bridgewater Triangle, just getting so many people with stories and people who wanted me to check this place out and that place out. And I landed on the Freetown State Forest, which, if people know Lizzie Borden, Lizzie Borden is from Fall River. Fall River used to be part of Freetown. So it's that area of Massachusetts. And as I'm looking into all of these different cases of ghosts and zombies and winged creatures and little troll type creatures, which I'm not sure if you know about, called puckwudgies. And all of these
I heard you were a puckwudgie guy. That's exciting.
Yes. So all these weird things were happening paranormally there, but then also there were crimes that were being committed, right? And the detective that I talked to said, well, it makes sense because you can be in Boston, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, Brockton, Massachusetts, places in Rhode Island, places that have high crime. And then you can be in the middle of nowhere in the Freetown State Forest in an hour. And so it makes sense that you would commit a crime somewhere else and then dump the body in the Freetown State Forest. And so I started really looking at the area and noticing that there was a higher rate of divorce. There was a higher rate of mental health disorder. The entire Bridgewater Triangle has these things, like the Bridgewater State Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital, has like 5 times more suicides in that mental health facility than anywhere else in the country. Anywhere else, I mean, it's crazy. And so I started to roll this idea around in my head of, is there a connection between paranormal, supernatural activity and really crime, right? And mental health disorder, and can the same juice that causes a ghost also impact your marriage, right? And can those things, and so when I wrote Dark Woods, it was really asking that question, right? This idea of, can some place be so cursed, for lack of a better word, or so damaged that it not only brings out the paranormal and the supernatural, but it also brings out the worst parts of your personality. And more importantly, does it draw other dark things to it? So Go, you can ask a question if you want.
Well,
I am going towards the answer to your original question.
No, I'm loving this. Because I'm having questions as we're going through. I'm like, oh no, I want to ask him that. Oh, I'm gonna lose it. What have you thought about what actually causes a specific small area like that to be so active or cursed? You know, like you said.
I think it's one of the folklorist in me wants to say, once you start talking about a place having that reputation, then you notice every little thing that happens there and it becomes part of the larger picture.
Okay.
One of the things that draws people to the Bridgewater Triangle, and the same can be held for the Ocala, is that regardless of how you think of the paranormal, you're going to find your answer there. So if you think violence and blood and catastrophe causes the paranormal, you've got that in the Bridgewater Triangle because it's the site of the bloodiest war in American history. If you're a person who believes in stone tape theory and you've got this whole idea that the elements around you trap things, it's there in the Bridgewater Triangle. If you believe in ley lines and if you believe in the power of running water, every perspective or approach you might have to your belief system in the paranormal is there. So some of these places are convergence of all of those kinds of elements. And every time in places like this that you think that you've discovered something, all of a sudden what you've discovered just becomes another piece of evidence and not the answer.
Okay.
If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So, you say, okay, well, a lot of people for the Bridgewater Triangle say the King Philip's War was the start of everything, right? The King Philip's War, which was absolutely horrific conflict between essentially, Plymouth Colony and the Wampanoag Native Americans, right? Where, absolutely horrible war crimes were committed on both sides. That's what started the activity of the Bridgewater Triangle. And I take a step back and I say, no, that's a symptom of it, right? That war should have never taken place. And what more? We can look back on history and say settlers and colonists were horrible people, but they were English. I'm from Florida. I'm not from Florida. Almost said that wrong way. I live in Florida. Florida is Spanish land. It's Spanish conquering territory. Like the Spanish came in and wiped places out. The British came in and made friends with you and then stabbed you in the back to get your land, right?
Yeah.
So the amount of violence that was in the King Philip's War is not the British way. It was not the way the British took over places. And therefore, why would they all of a sudden resort to those things? Because they were in this Bridgewater Triangle. So ultimately the answer becomes, there are these places where all of these elements seem to come together and maybe create some kind of vortex or some kind of portal that allows things and acts as kind of a magnetic and spiritual center for things, and then just bad stuff finds its way there.
Okay. Would you say, so you would say that places like this that just have that congregated energetic focus, they're special as compared to, like, you don't think just everywhere is haunted and just undiscovered yet, like it's specific locations.
I think I think every place is haunted, but I think that there are places where it's more intense, and there are places where it's more potent, right? And oftentimes, because now keep in mind, I'm a folklorist, so I deal with backstory, right? And have backstory develop what we're seeing or what we're thinking. And so in the Bridgewater Triangle, the classic ghost situation, right? Like two guys are at a bar and they get angry with each other, and one of them shoots the other one. And then everyone pulls that guy out and hangs him outside. And if you go to that bar, you can hear a gunshot and smell the smoke from the gun. And if you go outside, in other words, there's a story behind it, right? There's like something going on. Bridgewater Triangle stories and places like this oftentimes don't have a backstory, right? It's two people who have been best friends their whole lives and lived together for 20 years, move into an area of the Bridgewater Triangle, and within 6 months they're trying to kill each other while they're also seeing ghosts, right? Like, in other words, it's an unexplained within the unexplained. There are other things happening other than just you see a ghost or there's a UFO in the sky. there seems to be a negativity to it inherently, but then also in looking for why it might be, you're often left with more questions than answers.
Yeah, and like you were saying,
And you can tell them, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's debate over what is the triangle. Since Coleman came up with his original one, people say, well, how about this place? How about this? Well, what about this town? It's right outside the triangle. It's like, yeah, but if you look at the activity there, it doesn't fit this weirdness of the Bridgewater Triangle. And the same with the Ocala.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard going through the book, not and not really start to believe that something massive is going on in that area. And like I was saying, like, you felt that creepy, that it was the creepiest place you'd ever been, up in the Bridgewater Triangle before you even knew it was something.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so one of the first places, like, so I got back in the biz, I guess. And my goal was I wanted to find the legends and the ghost story in small towns in Florida that no one was talking about, right? Like, I didn't want to do the big places that everyone knows. I want to know the small little town, outside of Sarasota. What's the story that they tell, right?
Yeah.
And so I emailed, because being a former librarian and just kind of knowing the power of that, and having spent a lot of time in the circular files of libraries in Massachusetts, pulling out random stories that are just kept because they're cool, pre-digital age, I contacted librarians, and almost immediately, I got almost no responses, but almost immediately, like within an hour, the library at Astor emailed me back and said, we've got great stories. Would you like to come speak at our library? Like, they didn't know me. They didn't know anything about me or anything like that. They were just automatically, they wanted me to come there, and they wanted me to do a presentation in front of the people. And I'm like, I've never had that kind of response before. This place is weird. We went there, and almost immediately, and you don't find this about many places, right? We were there at like 11 o'clock in the morning, bright and sunny, and yet every picture we took came out dark. We could not get a good picture. We're talking to each other. We're maybe 2 feet away from each other, and our voices are echoing. And I started to say, this is really weird. Like, there seems to be something impacting the waves here, right? And impacting the way that sound, the way that light is traveling through. Like, this place is really weird. And as I'm listening to the stories of these people, I went there, I had like the 5 stories I was going to tell. They spent an hour and a half telling me the stories just in that small little town. And they were finishing each other's sentences, and all of them had a general consensus that this place has a lot of ghosts. Let us tell you about them because we share them amongst each other, and they're really, really well known.
Yeah.
As I started to do more research in the other towns, and this is right on the edge of the Ocala, technically in the Ocala, I started to get this impression that it had all the elements of Freetown. It had a whole bunch of really weird paranormal stories and supernatural stories and supernatural creatures and things like that. Had a high, we call it down here, skunk ape, a high skunk ape story. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of stories.
Is that Sasquatch?
Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Okay. There had, excuse me, and this is what really drew me in and started to make me notice. It had a lot of unexplained crimes attached to it, and then it had a high rumor level, which I discovered not to be a rumor, of cult activity. Like, in other words, people who were working, cults, but then also people who were working with all levels of witchcraft and things that involve energy and intention were finding their way into this forest. And so I'm like, jokingly, I think within the next week after that event, I was like, dude, we're looking at Dark Woods Part 2. Like, this is like, I'm going to write a book called Dark Woods Part 2. Worst name ever, right? And then the more I looked into it, the more I noticed that, like, wait a minute, this isn't a joke. Like, this place is like Freetown amped up and larger. And I started to notice that time and time again, just watching the news, every horrific crime outside of, the first 3 that you get that are from your local area, the Ocala or a town within the Ocala was being mentioned. And I started just make these same connections. And at the same time, I'm once again, like the Bridgewater Triangle, getting tons of people reporting, hey, have you heard this legend? Have you heard this legend? Have you heard this story from the Ocala? And I'm like, this is one of those places where things are converging.
Okay, so there were a couple of other topics in the book I kind of wanted to touch upon just to give people a little taster of what's in store for them when they pick up their own copy. Can you talk about the time slips that are occurring?
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of, and you can't talk about the time slips without talking about what I call the shift. And the more stories that I was getting, not folklore, but more of people's real experiences, and just telling me about the forest. One of the things that I noticed was that in the Ocala and a lot of the towns surrounding it, because this is not just about the forest, it's about the small towns that kind of, I'd say, living in the shadow of the Ocala. One of the things that they reported would be that things would disappear. And so, for example, in the book, I tell of one girl who had a cemetery in the woods behind her yard, but it wasn't always there. So sometimes she would go out and she would be able to see the headstones, and she would, do something, and sometimes she had scary experiences there, and then she would go back, and we're talking only 100 yards into the woods, there would be no headstones in the woods. Or hunters famously would go into the Ocala and they would mark off. Maybe they put, a hunting stand there, or maybe they just saw something, right? And so the hunters share this kind of information with people. They mark it on their GPS. They go there, and then boom, it's not there anymore. And then 2 weeks later, it is there. So the geography, both natural and unnatural, of the forest is never stable. Things are constantly shifting. People will say it. Cemeteries are famous for this in the Ocala. A headstone, it's in one place, and then it's not there the next time you go to show your friend that you found it, and then it's there at some other point, right? And along with that, and this led to the kind of like this whole portal vortex kind of explanation of what's going on there. The thing that it redefines itself all the time, and people never feel comfortable there, because regardless of how long they've been doing it, how long they've been taking their four-wheelers mudding, as we say here in Florida, out there, they're not sure what they're going to come across geographically anytime they go out. And along with this, people were reporting time slips to me in terms of they would be out driving, right? Or they would go out for a walk, and they would go on a path that they've known for a very long time. They would come home, and what had taken them an hour, by the time they get out of the forest, like 4 hours have passed, and there's no way for them to account for their time whatsoever.
Oh my gosh.
They would, I have one of the stories is about, a bunker that someone, that's kind of like an infamous, I guess you could say, spot within the Ocala now. And the person went in, they had their experience, and multiple people told me this about this bunker. They went in, and it's right off the road. You can see it. If you know what you're looking for, it's right off the road. They went to the bunker, they came back to their car, and all of a sudden, when they left the wooded area, it was now dark. And they were like, well, where did the time go? Like, what's going on here? And so people going into the Ocala, living there, right? Like, this is unlike a lot of places in Florida, which are very transient, people have lived for generations in these smaller towns around the Ocala. And they experience just a loss of time that they can't account for. And they're kind of used to it. It's almost, I talked about Astor. Astor has what they call Astor time, because they never know when things are really going to happen, or how people lose time there so quickly that they just have a very casual relationship to time. So something that's supposed to start at 2, it might start at 3, it might start at 3:30, it might start at 2:45. It all depends, because they're so used to losing time that they just account for it in their daily lives.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm so glad you brought up the bunker back to that, because I really wanted to. It was one of my favorite parts of the book, the dark man at the bunker. You relate a couple of stories specifically about those encounters. The one, it was the last story that you told, the woman's experience with it. I was reading it, and it literally sucked the air out of the room. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I don't want to give it away, but you're talking about shadow figures, right? This is a shadow, more specifically, the Hat Man.
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
a lot of reports of shadow men in the Ocala, and then there are shadow men with hats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you and I are talking and you're telling me something that happened to you, an experience you had, and probably a lot of your listeners, right? They to say something like shadow man with a hat, we all go, mm-hmm, yep, I got it.
Uh-huh.
If you're talking to someone from Mount Dora who is 67 years old and telling you a story about something that happened, and they say it was this dark figure and it wasn't quite solid, but it looked solid and it was wearing a hat, they're not fans of either of our work, no offense, right? They're people who are conveying something without a filter, right? So
Yeah.
you and I, when we experience the paranormal, if we experience it with one of the filters we've learned, and automatically our mind starts clicking and maybe even influencing what we see.
Yeah.
These people who are reporting these dark figures are the kind that experience it and then go looking for someone to help them explain it. And so they don't know that this is the cool thing in the paranormal, right? They don't know that this is a trend or that it's a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so when they're reporting it, they're telling me about it genuinely. Like they're not with no kind of preconceived notion of what that might be.
Okay, okay. Yeah, and we also like to categorize things so much out here when we think we know so much, and that's you really relayed there just genuine, like, I experienced this thing, this is what happened, this is what it looked like. You really do a very good job, because I don't think you said hat man once in that
Right,
chapter. It
right.
was just what was told to you. And I have to bust you a little bit. You said you're going to correct me. I've been saying Ocala. It's Ocala. I mispronounced it.
I don't think you have to worry about how it's pronounced because people here in Florida pronounce things weird. In my other book, my other Florida book, which is called Haunted Florida Love Stories. So
Hmm.
it's more about the entire state. I talk about Lorida, Florida, which is the worst town name ever, right? It's literally just they took Florida and they took the F off of it because
Yeah.
they couldn't figure out what to name themselves. And I've been talking about Lorida, Florida, and then finally someone says, it's Laredo, Florida, right? And someone else was like, it's Loretta, Florida, and I'm like, dude, whatever. So it's I think it's the weird, unusual, we'll say not weird, Florida accent thing,
Mm.
and the fact that it's oftentimes, depending on where you are in Florida, it's been settled by people from certain areas. And so it's Florida mixed with upstate New York, or it's Florida mixed with Wisconsin. And so you have this kind of weird way that people pronounce it. So you can pronounce it any way you want, as long as you spell it
Okay.
right when you're online trying to order the book.
Yeah. All right. All right. Another topic was, Florida banshees. Now, I don't know much about the banshee, but from the
Okay.
little that I do know, I thought the banshee was primarily like Irish folklore. Is there a large Irish immigrant
No,
population?
no, not at all. No. I think it's something that exists in most cultures.
Oh, okay.
But we fall back on the term banshee because it's the easiest to explain what we're actually trying to say.
I
Whereas
gotcha.
when people tell me the stories, they just explain what's going on, and maybe they fall back on banshee, the term banshee. But it's the. Are you talking about the coyote woman? Is that the story you're talking about? Or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I was, yeah.
So the coyote woman sounds more like if you imagine a coyote howling and a woman screaming underneath it, or crying and like wailing underneath it. Those two sounds mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people like, because of the nature of the coyote woman, she's out there stalking the woods looking for people who have done wrong. She's looking for bad people. And so she has thematically and folklorically, if I can make up a word, the same kind of draw you in siren aspect that a banshee would have. And so you take that along with the wailing, screaming thing,
Mm-hmm.
and you have like, oh yeah, she's out there in the woods, and she's out there in the woods. She's out there in the woods. It's much more of like a banshee. So I think it's us trying to understand what's going on.
Mhm.
more than it is the people of those towns necessarily calling it a banshee. Although that's a term that some people did use for some of these things.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
There was those were a couple of my favorite stories was the one about the coyote
Actually,
woman.
wait, there's the coyote woman right there, back right behind me.
Oh, no kidding. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I'm not allowed, I wasn't allowed to use that picture in the book because it's not my picture, but that's my coyote woman. My
Oh,
dinner
neat.
table. Yeah,
At your dinner
at
table.
my dinner table.
Well, like along with her story, like the kinds of stories, paranormal stories that are like about revenge and like retribution a little bit, it's
Yeah.
kind of like they're providing a service a bit because there is another um I don't know what to call it, phantom cryptid creature, something like
Yeah.
that called the
Undefinable. The
Stakini.
Stakini. Yeah.
Yes, what
Yeah.
is the Stakini?
Yeah. It's funny. I was with my kids last night. We were watching the show called Unexplained. And they were, the Wendigo came on, right? Or the Wendigo, talking about
Mm-hmm.
pronunciations. And my son, of all people, was like, is that really a cryptid though, Dad? Like, I wouldn't classify that as the same. And it was like, a little tear like kind of ran down my eye because I was like, oh, my son knows the difference between a cryptid and like an elemental or something, right? Um, and there are some things which defy those. They defy an easy category because something like the Stakini are not like anything else, right? Like I always say they're as if like you just took things that creep you out and threw them in a blender, right? They are seminal witch vampire owl hybrids, right? I mean, and so this is like, I mean, if you imagine that anything that might scare you, anything that might be under your bed, or in this case, in the woods, that
Mm-hmm.
might freak you out, you're going to find in them. They are a coven of women of Seminole women who were medicine women, so they were witches. And over time, each of them had been in their own way scorned by the man that they love.
Mm-hmm.
And so they called upon she who walks the circle, who is this almost god-like character in Seminole folklore. And they said, give us the power to get revenge on those who have hurt us. And so individually, she gives each of them the power in a very Loki devil kind of way, knowing that they will be tempted by that amount of power and abuse it, right?
Yeah.
And so after they all get revenge on the different men who have scorned them, they don't give the power back. Instead, they start to like, well, you know what? My ex-boyfriend did something to me too, so I'm going to go after him and I'm going to do something to him. And this vengeance, best thing, I'm a huge fan of Buffy, this vengeance demon power that they were given slowly started to take their humanity away. And so they lost being women, they lost being humans, and instead they became these owl vampires who had to live off the blood and entrails of human men. And so by day, they could appear very beautiful and very alluring and get people to kind of come deeper in the woods to follow them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would kill them, drink their blood, gut them, boil their entrails for soup. And these women found each other and they formed a coven, and they're out there in the Ocala waiting for men, and waiting for their next victim. And the crazy thing is, the most famous story attached to them is like a historical certainty, right?
Uh-huh.
Like there's this, the start of the Second Seminole War, which is it's a really important war in terms of American history because it kind of slingshots us to the Civil War. But essentially, Florida was trying to move the Seminole tribe out to Oklahoma, get them out of Florida, relocate them onto reservations in Oklahoma. And there were some Seminoles who were okay with this and they signed off on it, not necessarily speaking for the tribe because the nation wasn't unified like that. And so a lot of tension was rising between them. And there was this one place, it was kind of like a Seminole visitor center, right? Like it was the place where if I was a Seminole and you were a settler, you were a Floridian, we would go to this place and it was almost like a court, right? And they would like they would hash it out so that things didn't escalate.
Mhm.
Well, as this relocation is happening, they become the target. They become a symbol of growing tension between these two forces. And so they're like, we've got to reinforce this base that's right across the street from it, because bad stuff is going to happen. War is going to break out, and that's the first place they're going to attack.
Mhm.
And so they send 110 men up to reinforce this place called Fort King, which is Fort King is in the actual town of Ocala. And along the way, there's all these things that are going wrong, and there's bridges that are out, and they keep getting like, which they didn't know that the Osceola, who is kind of the leader of the Seminoles at this time, was intentionally like doing things to derail them and to take it longer for them to get there. And then at one point, they get attacked, and essentially the Americans get wiped out, right? Of the 110 that set out, only 3 survived the initial attack, and only 2 made it back to bases. And very few Seminoles died. And so this is a huge victory in Seminole history. This was like them saying, we're not going to just stand here. You can't just push us out. We're going to fight back.
Mhm.
And yet there's a Seminole legend that says no Seminoles were responsible. It's known as the Dade Massacre. No Seminoles were responsible for the Dade Massacre. Those soldiers, those 110 soldiers who were making their way to Fort King, were picked off one by one by the Stikini. And every single night when people went to bed, they didn't know who was going to wake up and who was going to make it to the end of the road, because the Stikini would come every night and they would take a few of them. And during day, they would lure a few of them into the woods by these beautiful women that the men could not seem to get over. And so this historically written, there are written documentation of all this happening, and it should be a success for the Seminoles. And yet, instead, they've also got this paranormal supernatural legend that explains how all those people died. And so it's a really interesting case that those two things should live with each other.
Yeah. What a legend. How you keep all of this stuff straight in your head. Let me borrow your brain. Oh my gosh.
You trust me, you don't want it.
All right. Well, I told you before we started recording, I'm going to have some random questions for you here near the end. I got some for you ready. Let me just pull up my notes.
Do I need a buzzer for this or no?
You can just vocalize. No,
okay.
No, you're good.
Is this a quick shot, like answer in less than a minute?
Take your time answering, because I like your ways, man. I like it.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's traditionally called the speed round, but you know what? Just feel free. Feel free, whatever comes to you.
So, all right. Yeah.
All right. So number 1, what is a mainstream paranormal figure or character that you have considered could be a tulpa that isn't generally thought of in that way?
Jeepers Creepers.
Nice.
to hit back into the book, because Jeepers Creepers is now seen at the location where they shot the movie Jeepers Creepers in the Ocala. So this is at 100%. It's a case of people continuously going there, trying to look for him and seeing him. I mean, it's got all these other hauntings that are at the same location, but specifically seeing the Jeepers Creepers figure there, I think has a lot to do with the movie.
Okay.
Does that count? Is that too mainstream?
Oh, no, absolutely. No, that's perfect. Perfect. All right. How often do you think fear plays a part in the paranormal experiences that people are having?
I think it's I'm going to say a 50-50 split. And by play the part, do you mean it influences, like the fact that they're scared changes the experience for them?
Yeah, because I think sometimes, and I've talked about this on the show too, is that the fear in itself, like that quote, men who fear demons see them everywhere, like that kind of thing. It can be taken both metaphorically and literally too. Like sometimes we create these things for ourselves.
Well, I think that 50% of the paranormal experiences that I hear about, I would say, involve some level of fear. Now, there was a study out of UCLA or USC, and we're talking like 15 years ago, that talked about the impact of adrenaline on memory. which is very, if you think about it, it defines evolution, right? Like the more that you learn to fear something, the safer you'll be to pass on your genes to the next generation, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so memory is actually solidified and not negatively impacted, but positively impacted by fear, which releases adrenaline because you need to know to not go to that part of the jungle again, or else the tiger is going to eat you. And so I would actually say that while fear is something that exists in like 50% of the cases that people tell me about, I think it's a good thing. But the other 50%, which is probably even more of what I deal with as a folklorist and a legend tripper, is either stories that people are telling about things that happened long ago to people who weren't them, like word of mouth kind of stories, or they're things that you didn't realize were paranormal until after they happened. And so you don't have time to be scared because you're too busy wondering, was that someone, was that just a woman on the side of the road? And so you don't have time to be scared until afterwards when you think about it and you start to process and you go like, that woman just disappeared. I know that I just experienced that. Yeah. Which is more of the creep factor than the fear factor. But I think that those two kinds of stories like share space with each other.
Oh, yeah. And that's a good point. Sometimes these things just happen, whether, it's
that having the conversation with your father where he finally tells you that he loves you, and then you get the phone call that he's dead. And you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? He just came in the house, like, and you go upstairs and he's not there. And you realize you just had an experience as opposed to being scared of your dad in the first place, which if you are, then sounds like a personal issue.
Oh, this is the thoughts that keep me going. Okay, next question. This is playing off of, I just listened to the Candyman episode you did. Yeah. What are your top 3 horror films?
Top 3 horror films of all time. Wow. And they've got to be horror films. They can't be ghost movies.
They can be, scary films. Yeah.
Scary. Okay. Number 1 is Poltergeist. I mean, it doesn't compete. Like, it's Poltergeist and everything else for me.
Classic.
I would say the original Candyman is up there. Yeah. Because that movie just terrifies me beyond what the special effects do to me emotionally. And then probably the scariest, I would say, not ghosty, demony, or whatever, is The Strangers. The idea of people just outside your house who have randomly picked you, and that's the stuff that scares. That's the stuff that really gets to me because we've mythologized some of these people in some of these cases, but there's still so much of them that are real. That you just have to understand that the reason why we mythologize them is because we're scared as crap. And so we have to retell the stories and make up little things about them because we can't understand the mindset of someone like that. Yeah. And I can't watch it all together. I got to watch it in bits and pieces.
Under your blanket with your head covered.
Under my blanket. And then make sure I have my dog because my dog's going to do something to protect me in that circumstance. My little mutt.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll just have one more question for you because I can't let you go without asking you. You are the expert. What is your favorite urban legend and why?
My favorite urban legend. My favorite. Okay, so I have 2 answers. My favorite urban legend, in terms of something spooky, is definitely Bloody Mary. And if other than Bloody Mary or Ghost Hitchhikers, but Ghost Hitchhikers, I think, go beyond urban legend. Like, I think they're a subset of haunting that are more genuine and like there's stuff going on there. But the idea of, it's funny, I posted that I had done the Candyman episode, that a Candyman episode was up. I had paranormal investigators telling me they refused to do Bloody Mary. They refused to do Candyman. They refused to do anything with mirrors. Like, I'll go into the Waverly Hills in my underwear. Yeah. But I'm not gonna, but don't even ask me to look at a mirror and say the name of the ghost that we're looking for, right? like the idea of looking into a mirror and conjuring something.
Hmm.
And I do this every year. I'm a high school teacher, and I talk to these kids, and I'm blah, 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 and I say, oh, so you're not scared of Bloody Mary? And this is how we get the different variations of it. I'm like, all right, go. Hey, you want to go to the bathroom? There you go. Don't even have to write a pass. Go to the bathroom, take your phone, go do Bloody Mary in the mirror right now. It's not even midnight or 3 a.m. as they like to do. Do it.
Hmm.
And I'll have the toughest kids, and they won't do it. And so the hold that story has, and the kind of permeations and the repetition of saying the name a certain amount of times, that's everything that makes me smile as a folklorist and as a ghostly folklorist. My favorite non-ghost urban legend is about the autistic penguin, which is the story. I know, which is the story of a woman who goes to whatever insert name of local aquarium, right? And she takes her autistic son and she loses him for about 10 minutes. And finally she finds him, and she's all mad. And so she immediately goes home and she makes him go into his room. And then she notices like she can't really hear noise up there. And she goes, and there's this splashing, right? He's in the bathtub. There's some splashing going on. She opens the door, and there he is on the floor playing with a penguin in the bathtub. And what he had done is during those 10 minutes, he had jumped over the penguin enclosure, swam over, and kidnapped a penguin. Nothing about this story makes sense whatsoever, right? And yet, and this is why it's my favorite urban legend, even more than any ghostly ones. If you called, I was living in Boston the first time I heard this story. If you call major aquariums, especially when this was making the rounds, and you said, hey, I have a weird question for you, they'll say there are no penguins that were taken by autistic. Like, you don't even have to ask the question. They automatically give you the answer. Houston, Boston, New York, Tampa, someplace in Nebraska, someplace in I think it was Arizona. They all had to hold press conferences telling people that autistic kids were not kidnapping their things from their displays. Like, it's the kind of urban legend that had the huge impact and social impact of no other urban legend except for maybe like the clown crazes that go through, right? Like the clown crazes that go through. Like, this was a story that makes no sense whatsoever, that was so big, major institutions had to like formally denounce that it had ever happened. That's pretty cool.
Crazy. It's cool, but it's so crazy that it had such a hold on people's. I don't know that that was so profound enough.
And it was and it was in dozens of cities. And and the other thing is, if you're a folklorist and you follow it, it came out really big in the 90s, in the early 90s, and then kind of lost favor. But then it had a huge spike right after the release of March of the Penguins. And so that's kind of when I got it on the second time around after March of the Penguins. And so you can see these things if you watch and you know what to look for. You can see a movie comes out or something comes out, and then all of a sudden some of these urban legends, whether they're ghostly urban legends or just food urban legends, they come back up to the surface, and that's what kind of makes them exist forever.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, this has been such a blast today talking with you. You're a phenomenal dude. Why don't you let everybody know where they can connect with you, where you prefer they connect with you, and also where they can pick up Haunted Ocala National Forest and all your other books.
You can get those on Amazon or wherever you get your books, or you can go directly to the website. If for some bizarre reason you want a signed copy of one, you can go to trippingonlegends.com. Tripping on Legends is the name of my podcast as well. So wherever you get your podcast, you can look up Tripping on Legends. And then probably the best way to keep in touch is either the Instagram, which is Spooky Tripping, is the Instagram account, and then Facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. And everybody listening, do go check out his website, trippingonlegends.com. It is a massive resource of stuff. I was farting around on there for a couple hours last night, just like, whoa. It's just a really great resource.
It's coming from having been really influential in Massachusetts and no one caring about me in Florida. It was interesting that someone was looking up something I had talked about, and they said, "Oh my word, the first thing that popped up was you," and I was like, "Yes." First page results. So
You made it. You
it's
finally made
exciting.
it.
Yeah, it's exciting. So
All right. And before we close it out, do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, advice you would like to leave with everyone?
the best advice I always have for anyone who's into the paranormal is don't lose your awe, right? Like never investigate so much or read stories so much or watch horror movies so much that you don't get creeped out by them. Like that's the word. That's like kids realizing there is no tooth fairy or Santa Claus, right? Like always try to keep like that idea of like this is some creepy stuff and not be like, but I've done that. Like, no, it's creepy. Embrace it. So that's the best advice I can always give for everybody.
That's awesome. Thank you so much again, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me.